Hey everybody, welcome to Sweater Weather. I'm Aaron Giovannone. Here's my cold take. I want to talk about Schitt's Creek. Why is this show so popular? Sure, it has strong writing and charming acting. Obviously that's important for a good show. But lots of shows have lots of talent on them, and they don't win 7 Emmys like Schitt's Creek did this year, especially not Canadian shows. So something about Schitt's Creek beyond its artistic quality really appeals right now, and appeals especially to liberal Hollywood, the people who give out awards like the Emmys. Now, one word to describe Schitt's Creek would be sweet. 2 words would be so sweet, and it is very, very sweet and cute and nice show. My mom loves this show. My girlfriend loves this show. I hear the neighbor playing episode after episode of Schitt's Creek. I hear the theme music through the walls. People love this show. I think it's because Schitt Creek's I think it's because Schitt's Creek depicts an ideal world that a lot of people would like to live in or would like to see. Writers for Variety, for CNN, have even called it, quote, utopian. That is, Schitt's Creek is a perfect place. But utopias depend on your point of view. Whose values does this so-called perfect society reflect? And Schitt's Creek definitely has liberal values. So Schitt's Creek reflects the needs and desires of liberal-minded people. Needs and desires that are going unfulfilled in our historical moment, especially in the United States. But this utopia of Schitt's Creek has a particularly Canadian quality, and I want to talk about that too. So what's so ideal about Schitt's Creek? Well, it's a tightly knit community, not easily found these days, and increasingly isolated and alienated societies that we often live in. The Rose family arrive in Schitt's Creek from the big city with their 2 adult children in tow, and they live together. Of course, they have their conflicts, but they all love each other and ultimately find a way to get along and to succeed. Now, who gets to spend that kind of time with their family these days, especially with their adult children? Another sign of its utopianness is that Schitt's Creek is very tolerant and accepting. The best example of this is with the character of David, played by series creator Dan Levy. Now, he is in an openly gay relationship, and indeed, maybe I shouldn't say that because it's a spoiler. But he is in an openly gay relationship, and nobody in the town seems to mind. There is no homophobia in Schitt's Creek. Dan Levy had this to say about it, quote, "I have no patience for homophobia. We show love and tolerance. If you put something like that out of the equation, you're saying that doesn't exist and shouldn't exist." Now, there's a big difference between saying something doesn't exist and something shouldn't exist, but let's not pick his words too closely here. Obviously, the world would be a lot better without homophobia. And such a nice liberal world as Schitt's Creek is an escape for audiences, especially American audiences, who live in a political reality dominated by right-wing populism and Trumpian Americana. So liberal Americans especially have been having a rough ride the last several years, and I think Schitt's Creek offers them a little escapism. Importantly, Canada is sometimes a place that liberal Americans want to escape to. Now, Schitt's Creek is a very Canadian show. It originally aired only in Canada. It's a CBC production. It's filmed partly in Orangeville, which is a kind of a moderately sized city near Toronto. And it features lots of well-known Canadian writers and actors, especially Eugene Levy, who any American audience of an older stamp would recognize as Canadian. And the town embodies everything that liberal Americans believe Canada is: small, tolerant, multicultural, a place with reasonable civil politics and free healthcare. And because Canadians are inundated with American media, we see ourselves through the eyes of Americans too. Canadian artists and writers, even if they work in Canada and also produce for a Canadian audience, know that to access the more lucrative and much larger American market, they're going to have to work with an idea of Canada that Americans are already familiar with. We could think of another example of this, liberal Canadian utopia in Handmaid's Tale, another extremely popular show with American audiences. The Handmaid's Tale, it's by Canadian novelist Margaret Atwood. In that HBO adaptation, a feminist dystopia in the United States involves an escape route to Canada to the north, where women are not second-class citizens and where they have free healthcare. Obviously, healthcare is very important to Americans in recent years, given the political discourse down there. Now, how far back in history does this escape to Canada trope exist in the American mind? Well, there's the draft dodgers from the Vietnam War. There's the Underground Railway, slaves escaping to Canada, where slavery was made illegal earlier. Indeed, that's the historical reality that The Handmaid's Tale is partly using in its depiction of Canada. Now, there's even further back, there's the Loyalists who escaped the revolutionary United States to what was left of British North America to the north. So there is a long tradition, and it's backed up by real historical events that at times made Canada a refuge for Americans. And this is a terrible moment for the United States. The US is chaotically governed, it's infested with a deadly virus, and all they can do is send one measly $1,200 check out to people. Now, Canada looks great by comparison with its more stable government, its better handling of the virus, its $2,000 a month CERB support payments. So now is another historical moment when liberal Americans look northward with dewy eyes. And that's what they do when they watch Schitt's Creek and lavish Emmy Awards on it. And it flatters Canadians. Is this a good or a bad thing to be flattered by this utopian depiction of Canadiana? It's true that Canadian nationalism has a liberal and even a social democratic air about it. Canadian national identity, when it was separating itself from British Canadian identity, found its fullest expression in the years after World War II. And those were also the years that the welfare state was at its height and it was being built. We have come to attach national importance to the healthcare system, and an important part of the welfare state. A system that we widely attribute to a CCF NDPer, Tommy Douglas, the former Premier of Saskatchewan and federal leader of the NDP. Insofar as Canadianness means some kind of social democracy like healthcare or CERB, I have a hard time saying that's a bad thing. If we're motivated as Canadians to protect and expand social programs that, we think make us Canadian, then I guess that's a good thing if it drives us to find a fuller expression for this Canadian utopia. But if this idealized image of ourselves that comes to us partly through American media makes us smug and conservative, if it's like we say, things are already good, look, why change them, then Canadian utopia maybe isn't such a great idea. So the official sweater weather take on Schitt's Creek is maybe we should think critically when we see ourselves through the rose-tinted glasses of the liberal American psyche. But by no means am I trying to ruin Schitt's Creek for you. It's a sweet and nice and funny show, and you should enjoy it if you like that kind of thing. I enjoyed it too. It just made me think about Canadian Utopia. And obviously, this is a sweater weather show because David wears great sweaters.